Before we dive into the spiritual fall of man, I want us to understand something critical from the very beginning. In biblical mysticism, death is sin, and sin is the sting of death. That's a powerful idea found in 1 Corinthians 15:56. When we talk about a sinner, we're not just talking about someone who does bad things. We're talking about someone who is completely governed by the desires of the flesh. They dwell in and are satisfied by the physical, carnal world. Now let's go back to the beginning. Genesis 1:27 tells us that God created man in his own image. In the image and likeness of God, he created them, both male and female. He gave them dominion over the earth and every plant and tree for food. Adam and Eve were created to live in a state of perfect harmony, a state of life. God placed man in the Garden of Eden to tend to it, to guard it, to keep it, and he gave them a single, clear command. You may freely eat of every tree in the garden, God said, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat, for in the day that you eat of it you shall surely die. This wasn't an arbitrary rule. It was a choice between two paths, the tree of life and the tree of knowledge. The tree of life, which symbolizes Christ, represents a life lived in communion with God. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil represents independence from God, a life ruled by our own understanding. And this is where the spiritual fall begins. The serpent, more subtle and crafty than any creature, approaches the woman. Did God really say you can't eat from every tree? He asks, planting a seed of doubt. The woman corrects him, explaining that they can eat from every tree except the one in the middle of the garden, lest they die. But the serpent's response is the first great deception. You will not surely die, he says. For God knows that in the day you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing the difference between good and evil. This lie is the same lie that led to Satan's own fall, the desire to be like the Most High, to ascend above God. It's the ultimate sin, the desire to replace God with ourselves, to be the master of our own lives. The woman sees that the tree is good for food, a delight to look at, and a tree to be desired to make one wise. She takes the fruit and eats. Then she gives some to her husband, and he eats. In that moment the eyes of both of them were opened, and they knew they were naked. They had gained knowledge. But what did it cost them? Their innocence, their perfect communion with God. They were now ruled by the desires of the flesh, and they had chosen the path of death. So in summary, we see that what was in the garden were two distinct paths, a tree of life and a tree of knowledge of good and evil, which ultimately led to death. To dwell in sin means you are ruled by the desires of the flesh, and the Bible tells us the flesh belongs to the devil. The fall of man was not just a mistake. It was a spiritual rebellion. It was the choice to trade the divine life of God for the knowledge of good and evil, a knowledge that brought separation and death. The question for us today is, are we still eating from that same tree? Are we seeking to be wise in our own eyes, or are we seeking the life that comes only from Christ?